Good morning. Welcome to AmCham Cambodia's Agricultural Trade and Investment in the Kingdom of Cambodia. Today we have some very special guests, but before we do the introductions, I'd like to just spend a minute on agriculture in the Kingdom of Cambodia. So it's one of the most important parts of the economy. It represents 23% of GDP, and it actually employs about 32% of the workforce. So it's very important to the Cambodian economy. In terms of the United States, the bilateral trade between the United States and Cambodia is about $220 million. For Cambodia to the U.S., it's about $157 million, and U.S. to Cambodia, it's the difference, obviously. But so the U.S. send soybeans and distilling products to Cambodia. And in terms of Cambodia to the U.S., we primarily receive wood products. So today, as the emphasis on agriculture gets more important, given the economy dynamics are changing, there's been some struggle in the garment industry, obviously, with the pandemic, and a lot of workers have returned to farming. So it's becoming more and more important. We will talk about some of the successful projects the U.S. in particular today has invested, and some of those are aid-related. So I will first do a quick introductory of the panel that we have today. We have joining us from our Ho Chi Minh with the United States Department of Agriculture, Benjamin Petlock, who's a senior agricultural attaché with the USDA. James Hershey is joining us on my right. He's the chief of party for CAST, which I'm going to get this completely right, stands for the Commercialization of Aquaculture for Sustainable Trade. We have Patrick Davenport joining us as well from BRM Agro. He's a founder and CEO. And Daniel Rothenberg is the CEO of Baby Bird Farm, which is quite famous in the Kampot area of the country. So I will let Benjamin start off, and that will be the first presentation of the day. So Benjamin, over to you, to Ho Chi Minh City.
Great, and thank you, and good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Benjamin Petlock, the Senior Agricultural Attaché here at Ho Chi Minh City with the Foreign Agricultural Service. Even though we're based in Ho Chi Minh City, we actually cover the Cambodia market from our offices here. I think I have a presentation. Can we bring that, or should I just do my introduction? I'm sorry. So with the Foreign Agricultural Service, I've been in Vietnam around 5 to 6 years. I've only been able to get to Cambodia once before COVID hit. Obviously, we're in a full lockdown here, so that makes things a bit difficult for us to get over there. But I am also happy to introduce Sokia Hoi, who is our embassy in Phnom Penh. And actually, Sokia is joining us after 1 week, or 1 week ago. It's actually our first office ever in Cambodia, so we're very excited to have Sokia on board. We brought her over as a commercial specialist from the economic section of the embassy, so she's already got a lot of experience supporting U.S. businesses in Cambodia. She also has a background working with international development companies as a agribusiness specialist, if I have that correct, Sokia. Anything else you want to say or introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you, Ben. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So as Ben mentioned, I'm Sokia Hoi. You can call me Sokia. The new office here, but definitely not the new face, as I've been here in the embassy for over the past 5 years, trying to connect maybe some of you to different U.S. companies as well. So I'm really excited. I'm so happy and delighted to actually share a closer journey with you all, especially in this field of food and agriculture. So please don't hesitate to let me know, to say hi, to be friends, as I will try to be connected with you over the next month or so to have and get to know each other better. And I'm really happy to be here in this office today and to share this platform with you all. So thank you.
Okay. James, would you like to do an intro? Oh, sorry.
No,
Okay.
I guess we're doing the introductions. I'm Jim Hershey. I'm the chief of party, as Anthony said. That means I head up the project that Anthony mentioned, CAST. We call it CAST for short. I'm the senior ranking executive for the American Soybean Association, which is my boss and the contractor with the USDA for this project. Our CAST project here is run by the American Soybean Association, which is registered with the government as an international NGO. So thanks, Anthony, for the opportunity to be here, and thanks, AmCham, for putting together a great panel.
Patrick?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Davenport. I'm a director and one of the founders of BRM Agro. We have a very large rice plantation and rice milling company in Kampot Pepper. We've been investing in the region for quite some time. We have a regional fund, the Cambodia Fund, which is the vehicle that we use to invest here. I've been in the region for 33 years. I've been working off and on in Cambodia for about 15 years. And we're really happy to be here today. Thank you to AmCham and to the organizers for putting this together.
Daniel?
Good morning. My name's Daniel. I'm from New York. I've been in Cambodia about 20 years now, on and off, working back and forth between the two countries. I run a large farm for us in Sept now. That is, we're growing the world famous Kampot Pepper, and to make the farm more multi-farming rather than mono-farming, we grow a lot of fruit trees, we grow chilies from South America, and we're just trying to improve the quality of farming and the quality of food products available in this market to make it a better farming place for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all for the introduction. And I forgot to introduce myself. It's going to be helpful as well. I'm Anthony Galliano. I'm the president of the American Chamber of Commerce here in Cambodia. Ben, I'm going to send it over to you on your presentation so we could start there.
Great, thanks. I believe your team's going to queue it up now. Great, thank you. And I should be remiss, I didn't get a chance to thank AmCham and Anthony and Travis for giving us the opportunity for service in the U.S. Department of Agriculture and what we're doing in Cambodia. So again, please take my thanks from on behalf of the Foreign Agricultural Service. So yeah, today I'll be giving an overview of USDA. Slide, please. I'll just do a quick overview of the Foreign Agricultural Service, what we do, who we are, a few words about our overseas presence. I'll then speak about some of our partners, which we call cooperators, as well as associations, and then I'll say a few words about the U.S.-Cambodia trade snapshot. Next slide. So for Foreign Agricultural Service, we have essentially we have what we call 3 or 4 main roles. The first is trade policy, ideally to expand, maintain market access for U.S. agricultural and agricultural-related products. Trade promotion, which is promoting U.S. products in markets. Trade capacity building, which is working with countries or within countries to help develop their own trade capacity abilities, which both helps the country in question as well as helping develop the market for taking in U.S. exports. And market intelligence, which is what we do. With market intelligence, we can have a better idea of trade policy, what products to promote, and where areas of capacity building are needed. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of FAS. In 2019, COVID hit the United States. We did a reorganization. So we're still developing these, obviously, with COVID's effects on how things are working back in the States. Actually, we have the administrator who oversees all FAS operations. We have the Global Market Analysis Office. They're the ones in charge of market intelligence, the commodity reporting that we all do. These are programs to support exporters as well as our trade capacity programs. Trade policy and geographical affairs, they're sort of the policy gurus. These are desk officers that, or topic officers, I would say, that specialize in regulatory issues in a country that we work closely when we talk about trade policy. Foreign affairs is the part of FAS that supports our operations overseas. We're also part of the foreign affairs section. And then business operations are just the day-to-day operations, the finances, the accounting of FAS. Next slide. Market information. This is a critical part of what we do. We basically do what we call required reporting, which are usually focusing on commodities or regulatory developments or sort of an exporter guide. So commodity report that we're about to do for Cambodia will be on the grain and feed market. What does the market look like? What is the domestic production? What are imports? What are exports looking like? And are there any issues that affect the trade numbers coming in? And this is really critical because this information goes, if you could stay, yeah, thank you. This information is critical because it goes back to Washington, who then uses this information to publish what we call a World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimate, which is basically seen as the gold standard in commodity reporting. As I said, we also do exporter guides, and if there's a regulatory development that's passed by the government, we'll publish that for U.S. stakeholders back in the United States. Next slide. Trade policy. So with this, we monitor and enforce trade agreements. We work with the USTR, the U.S. Trade Representative, on negotiations to either expand or maintain market access. We also get involved in bilateral and multilateral engagement. This is through such organizations as the World Trade Organization or the FAO. And then we also preventing and resolving barriers that may happen to prevent open trade. So if the government has a new regulation, we try to work with them to have it sort of follow world accepted and scientifically accepted trade standards. And the idea is we really want to try to prevent any barriers to U.S. products coming into a market. Next slide. Trade promotion. This is one of our more interesting and fun aspects, I would say. So this is we can do these through promotional events, trade shows. We have the Export Credit Guarantee Program, which is a financing of, I guess, a guarantee program for exports. The guarantee program, which is a credits guarantees to facilitate the financing of manufactured U.S. services to improve or establish agricultural-related facilities in emerging markets, and trade missions. So this would be organized businesses and state representatives to a country to understand it and look for opportunities there. So before COVID hit, this was with Ambassador Murphy. We did a trade promotion of U.S. products in one of the Cambodian supermarkets. Next slide. Trade capacity and building and food security. This is an important aspect as well. Obviously, this matters more for emerging markets such as Cambodia, which we have the Cochrane and Borlaug Fellowship programs. And these are exchange programs where we send selected participants to the United States, either through the Cochrane program, which is for either businesses or government experts. The Borlaug Fellowship program is more of a long-term scientific development program where we take a selected person in the beginning or middle of their career and we partner them with a mentor in the United States for anywhere to 2 to 4 months. And the idea here is that they get insight into sort of the U.S. regulatory development, scientific background, with the idea that they take this back to their home country with that experience. McGovern Dole and Food for Progress are two of our main programs, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But these are two of our biggest programs in Cambodia. We also have the EC LEDS program, which is a climate-smart agriculture program. And we also do activities through the Economic Forum, especially on issues of food security. Next slide. So just briefly about the Foreign Service. We were chartered in 1953. We are actually part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, even though we do have Foreign Service officers like State Department. We have 94 international offices now that we have Sokia and the Cambodia office on board. And our main role is to role in the promoting and the prosperity of U.S. food and agriculture. Next slide. And this is just a sort of a map of where we are. You know, when I first joined FAS over 20 years ago, there were probably 1 or 2 dots in China, maybe few dots in other parts of Southeast Asia. And really, we have a focus on Europe at the time. And I think we've seen a major shift to Asia, especially Southeast Asia. I think in my own personal opinion, I think USDA would agree with me. We see a lot of future here for U.S. Agricultural exports. Next slide. So an important part of one of our important parts are the cooperators and associations, and these are essentially industry associations that represent agricultural producers or processors, and we call them cooperators, and their job is essentially to promote U.S. commodities overseas. So, for instance, on that market promotion we did in Cambodia. With the Washington Apple Commission. There's also the U.S. Meat Export Federation. So these are nonprofit associations, and their job is to represent their members overseas, and that's either to do promotional efforts, to get market intelligence. Our cooperatives are often our first line of if we hear a problem or if we hear of an opportunity of a new market, they may come to us. And also, they help us with trade policy issues. So if they are facing problems at ports, they'll report that information to us that we can then use for our trade policy aspects. Next slide. Another important part are the state departments of agriculture. And these we partner with these groups from different states on marketing and promotion activities such as trade missions, buyer missions, and trade shows. So we'll often work with them to organize the participants in these shows or to help them with their own efforts within a country if they're doing sort of a state-specific. So say, for instance, we may have the state of Oregon that will bring a bunch of agricultural businesses over to, say, Cambodia, for instance. We'll work with them to help them identify partners, to help facilitate site visits, as well as give them information on the Cambodian market. Next slide. On the checkout programs, just briefly, these are what we call research and promotion programs, and they promote and provide research and information for a particular agricultural commodity without focusing on a specific brand or producer. These producers and handlers usually finance their programs based on a per commodity, and they try to improve the market position of a commodity by expanding markets, increasing demand, and developing new uses and markets. And this is generally organized through the USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service, which is one of our sister agencies. Next slide. Just briefly about Cambodia. So this is sort of a quick snapshot over the last 5 years. So as Anthony mentioned, our total trade right now of U.S. exports going to Cambodia is around $72 million, a little under $73 million, I should say. And it's a combination of what we call agricultural and agricultural-related products. So agriculture's, what you would assume is agriculture, bulk commodities such as soybeans, cotton, consumer-oriented items such as meats, fruit, vegetables. And then when we say agricultural-related items, which are I think are critical in Asia, because these are items such as forest products or fishery products that are often critical to efforts. So, for instance, in Vietnam, it's a major market for U.S. hardwood because that all goes into the furniture industry in Vietnam. Next slide. And as Anthony mentioned, the relationship between the trading relationship between the United States and Cambodia is growing very, very rapidly. Just maybe starting with I'll start with the U.S. on the right side. As I mentioned, $72 million. This is out of $445 million total. Some of our major products are what we call distiller dried grains with solubles. These are sort of the surplus elements of ethanol production in the United States, and it's very popular as a feed item. Hides and skins, a lot of which probably goes into Cambodia's own domestic production operations. Dairy products, we had a record year in 2020. This is one of our growing areas in Southeast Asia. And soybeans at the bottom. You'll see there we also had a record year. Now, of course, we're happy about the growth. Oh, sorry, if you could stay on that, please. We're happy about the growth of U.S. products, but we also focus on what is Cambodia importing to the United States, or exporting to the United States, I should say. And you can see here, it's a much larger element of the Cambodian, the trade relationship. So you'll see here, paneled wood products makes up nearly 2/3 of it, with nearly $200 million. Live animals, pet food, and rice, where we had a record year as well. Next slide. And this just, we basically, I think a lot of you probably have more experience than I do in terms of what are the aspects of trades we're looking at. So when we're talking to U.S. Stakeholders, we talk about tariffs, we talk about the ASEAN relationship, the access that ASEAN members have to the Cambodian economy. We talk about other policy issues such as the Everything But Arms Preferential Union, the issue of cross-border trade, and we try to explain to Americans the importance of the Cambodia. Next slide. Again, more for the American side, but developing how we're looking at what are the opportunities in Cambodia. So we do note that the demand for animal feed, as I said, with distilled dried grains. The retail scene here is changing quickly, but similar to Vietnam, the wet market is still dominant. Also similar to a lot of other Southeast Asian countries, food safety is a critical issue and becoming more important, especially with a growing middle class. And as with most of Southeast Asia, it's a very young population with a diversified food preference. Next slide. Again, it's just a quick snapshot of our cooperators. As Jim mentioned, the American Soybean Association and WISH are very prevalent here. There's the U.S. Dry Bean Council, the Pear Bureau Northwest, Washington Apples, and they were the ones involved in the ambassador event that we did, I think, in early 2020. Seafood, we do trade missions with them. The U.S. Meat Export Federation, which does buyer missions and chef training. The U.S. Poultry Egg Export Council that also does chef training, and the Potatoes USDA, which does chef training. And the great thing about the chef trainings are they're very quite popular, where we do training for young chefs on issues such as food safety, how to handle certain products. And the nice thing about that is it's training the next generation of important parts of the food service industry within a country, at the same time exposing them to make that connection of the high quality, high value of American products. Next slide. Capacity building program. So McGovern-Dole, as I mentioned, this is the both a cash and in-kind school feeding program that's been in Cambodia since 2002. That has, when USDA has donated the equivalent of about $100 million. Food for Progress. This is an important part of what Jim is doing, and Jim can talk much better to this program than I ever could. But it's also one of our major capacity building development programs in Cambodia. The Food Safety Network, which was funded by U.S. Agency for International Development, covered pest risk analysis and food safety issues such as salmonella for fruits in Cambodia. And this program concluded in 2021, but it's a good example of a trade capacity program where we help the export elements of a country while getting them familiar with the internationally accepted regulatory practices and scientific standards. So it's sort of a program that helps the United States and Cambodia in that respect. This is the Lower Mekong Initiative Seed Trade Project, is to promote better access to quality seed, again, and to get Cambodian exporters familiar with regulatory measures. And then the Cochrane and Borlaug exchange programs, and that's on the next slide. If you could go to that, please. This is where we have exchange programs where we send teams to the United States, and in the past they've looked at elements such as food safety, feed ingredients. In 2020, we had two activities, one for Cochrane that was going to look at training government officials on trade statistics, how to collect statistics, as well as a food safety Borlaug fellow. Unfortunately, both of these have been delayed till 2022 due to COVID. Next slide. And just briefly finishing up. As I mentioned, we're really lucky to have Sokia on our team. So she is the agricultural specialist located at the embassy in Phnom Penh. We cover Cambodia out of Ho Chi Minh City, so myself there. We actually have a FAS officer that will be dedicated specifically to Cambodia. I think a lot of you met Megan Francic, who was pivotal in our efforts in Cambodia, and she'll be replaced by Jane Luxner in 2022. Robert Hansen is our agricultural counselor based in Hanoi and basically heads up FAS operations in the region. We have the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, and they cover Cambodia as well. And Animal Plant Health Inspection Service has sort of two roles where they protect American agriculture by doing inspection or implementing and regulating inspection processes for plant and animal products going into the United States. So for those wishing to, say, send new fruits from Cambodia to the United States, APHIS takes the lead role in regulating that. They also get involved in market access for U.S. agricultural products coming into a country, especially for fruits and vegetables. I believe the next slide is my last slide. If you go to that. Yeah, and that's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. We're going to leave the question and answers till the end of the presentations. I definitely have a lot of questions for you myself. We're looking to definitely increase trade between, bilateral trade between the U.S. and Cambodia. There's a lot of talk about China increasing agricultural trade, but U.S. is the largest import market, I believe, of agriculture, as one of also the second largest, historically was the largest manufacturer of food. So as our Prime Minister here says, he's hunting for trade, and I think the U.S. is a perfect destination for that. So we'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to now hand it over to James Hershey. I'm personally very proud of what the United States is doing here in Cambodia to improve the fishery industry, and the 5-year program that you have and the contribution the government is making through this program is fantastic. So I know you have a lot of work to do. Although Cambodia is surrounded by water, rivers, and ocean, we still actually take a lot of fish from watering countries.
That's right. That's right.
And you're trying to change that to have some domestic fish production. So again, I'm very proud of what the U.S. government support here is, and I'll hand it over to you to talk about that program.
Wonderful. Thanks. If we could start my presentation, that'd be great. As I was pulling the slides up, I mentioned I'm the chief of party for the CAST project. Thanks, Ben, for mentioning the Cooperators and the checkoff programs. That's actually who's sponsoring today's event. We got some resources from American Soybean Association in St. Louis and their sister organization, the United Soybean Board. It's one of those checkoff programs. So it says cast final. So anyway, there we go. All right, slideshow, and we're off. Okay. The project is are we going to do the slides? No, you can do the slides. Next slide, please. The project has lots of partners. First of all, it's funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food for Progress. Ben mentioned that. And we've got some subcontractors bringing specific expertise. 2 land-grant universities, Kansas State and Auburn. Auburn's world-class aquaculture and fisheries university. And World Vision Cambodia, many of you might be familiar with them. They do a lot of different type of work, but they're helping us with especially some of our post-harvest actors. More about that in a minute. But you know, this is a public-private partnership with the USDA and American Soybean Association, but I really want to emphasize that we partner with Fisheries Administration as part of the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestries, and Fisheries. They attend many of our trainings. We're in touch with them regularly. And the whole project, in fact, follows FIA's strategy in the Royal Government of Cambodia's strategic plan for aquaculture development. Next slide. So what's it all about? You know, what's the CAST program? Commercialization. This is not a subsistence farmer support program. We're looking for commercial farmers, medium scale, large scale, who want to make money and build their businesses. So it's about commercialization of aquaculture. Sustainable, you know, many people talk about environmental sustainability, and certainly aquaculture can contribute to that by reducing the pressure on wild fish caught, the fisheries that you were talking about, the wild fish that's dwindling in Cambodia, and managing water resources, as well as reducing the amount of small fish, baby fish, that are fed to some of the larger fish. We have a different feeding system that has a way to bring those fish to market more economically. And the last word, trade. Remember, commercialization of aquaculture for sustainable trade. As Ben really put it very well, you know, farmers need customers to sell their fish to. Without trade, farmers not going to farm. Those post-harvest actors, you know, those folks need people to buy their fish, the consumers. And with modern aquaculture, you need inputs, like any farming operation. You need seed. Well, in our business, seed is baby fish. So you need fingerlings and fry and feed, manufactured feed that's proper floating and proper protein density. Next slide. Okay, well, let's drill down a little bit. We work all along the value chain. And so we work with hatcheries, the seed, as well as the feed guys. Okay, those of you Americans watching this is not a carnival prize. This bag of tilapia fingerlings comes from a hatchery. Now they inject oxygen into that bag, you know, for the journey, but we can teach hatcheries to do better. Don't send them in the middle of the day. If you have to send them in the day, put them in the shade. Don't put too many fish in the bag. You know, these are all techniques that can be learned and managed and make for better farming. Feeding the fish, right? You want floating fish feed. That means manufactured feed. Lower left here, AgriMaster is the one feed plant producing aquaculture here in Cambodia. That's them receiving a barge of soybean meal, happens to be from the U.S., that they bought, and they're going to make floating fish feed with it. But, you know, that's only one feed plant. Imports from Vietnam are extremely important because that's what fish farmers can use and stop using some of those other inefficient feed products. Next slide. So those folks sell their products to farmers. This project is working with 600 commercial farmers, commercial-sized farmers. I mentioned medium to large scale. That's extremely important for Cambodian aquaculture. Get those larger fish farms more efficient. We put together with Auburn a 50-plus page, 17-topic manual for training fish farmers. It's both in Khmer and in English, and Fisheries Administration is going over that with us, giving us their advice on it as well. But we're training those farmers. We're going to their farms. We're asking them to come to training, to improve their techniques. One of the reasons, Anthony, perhaps why there's so much fish imported here is because the Cambodian farmers, frankly, could do better. They are not efficiently producing enough and lowering the cost, increasing their own profitability to compete. And we can help them do that. Next slide. I mentioned that the farmers need people to buy their product. In Cambodia, it's a very sophisticated market. You have collectors. Those are the guys that go to the farms and get in the water with their nets and pull those fish out. They load them on trucks, like you see this picture on the right, and they go to the landing, what you in Cambodia call a landing, or a market. It's a market. The wet market sellers come to those landings and buy their fish for the day or fish that they're going to distribute. So those are your collectors and wholesalers, processors. And we recently did a study, a sector growth study. I encourage people to look for that on the CAST Facebook page. EMC did a study and determined that there could be a strong export market for Cambodian processed fish. People really like it. Between the diaspora of Cambodian emigres and other people that really like Cambodian fish. This guy in the background, you can't see him, but he's producing dried fish. He sells to the Vietnamese barge guys that bring products up to Cambodia because they really love the Cambodian salted dried fish, and they take that product back. It's an informal export, but there's probably ways to formalize that. And I'll talk more about this picture in the lower left is a collector in Kampot Pepper, I believe, who's expanding his business because he wants to grow it. Next slide. So we've covered inputs, farmers, the post-harvest actors. We need an enabling environment. You need support services, finances. One of the Fisheries Administration's points and objectives is to increase the resources going into financing specifically aquaculture projects. So CAST does that in cooperation with Chamron, MFI, microfinance institution, but other ones are seeing the opportunity too, and they're jumping in as well with their own resources, AMK being a good example. There's even talk of an insurance product, a farm insurance product that could help spread the risk in agriculture. You guys at farm,
That would be fantastic.
Huge risk for farmers. I talked a lot about the Ministry of Agriculture and FIA, really important, the policies that they have internally and externally. We're building the capacity of Cambodians to manage their own aquaculture industry, especially from a technical point of view, trying to get the farmers farming better, et cetera. And there's programs at the University of Agriculture. I wish it was the University of Aquaculture, but RUA does have an aquaculture department that we're working with. And to cap it all, I'm going back to that middle bullet, the Cambodian Aquaculturist Association. We're helping start an association of all value chain actors, feed mills, hatcheries, farmers especially in 6 provinces, but it'll spread to other provinces as well, and the post-harvest actors. We in the States know how important association work is. Cambodia does too. I think you guys have one in the rice industry.
Yes.
You know, there's other successful agricultural associations, and I like to announce next week, or actually it's this week already, isn't it? The second annual general meeting of the CAA is going to be meeting, and they will launch a request for proposals for association strategic planning. We're looking for a little help here in Cambodia, somebody that knows how to put together a strategic plan for an association. So those of you that do that kind of work, be on the lookout for that. We're looking for some bidders on that piece of business. And I think the next slide is a great big thank you to, again, my bosses, the American Soybean Association's WISH program, focusing on trade and development, doing agricultural development work around the world that can help build trade, and our parent organization, the American Soybean Association. Thanks again, AmCham, for giving us a great opportunity to talk about what we're doing.
Thanks, Jim. That's incredibly fabulous work. Very pleased to see the progress that has been made, and we'll talk more about a little more detail about what you see as the outcome of the program after the 5 years of $17 million assistance and support. Mr. Patrick Davenport, also American, he is going to talk about his 2,200 hectares of farm.
Our rice plantation and
Right.
rice mill in Kampot Pepper.
And especially, I guess, a little bit of touching on the famous berry rice.
Yes. Yeah, we'll get to that. Could you load the slide deck, please? And am I controlling it or you're controlling? Okay, thank you. Okay.
Hey, it's working for you. You must be a technician.
Okay, here we go. So here, AmCham, a little picture from the farm. So BRM Agro is one of the largest rice plantations, commercial rice plantations in the country. We have 2,200 hectares in Kampot Pepper. And in addition to our plantation, we have completed 2 months ago our first rice mill with the capacity of 20,000 tons per year. We grow exclusively jasmine rice varieties, such as Rumdul, which is an award-winning rice from Cambodia. Those who are watching who are not from Cambodia might not be aware of this, but Cambodia won the World Rice Congress best tasting jasmine rice variety 4 years in a row. We have helped to grow and develop Rumdul. We provide seed to the Ministry of Agriculture through a Japanese Development Bank initiative, and we've been helping to try to develop Rumdul further. We also grow regular jasmine, red jasmine, and recently what we call berry rice or rice berry, which is a very great tasting rice that's filled with antioxidants and omega-3, very good for your health, and we're very proud of being able to develop something new in the rice industry. Our project is a joint venture between my good friend Mr. Chan Ong, who is our CEO. I think you gave me that title. Unfortunately, I'm a director of the company. Ong is our CEO. Ong is a fantastic, honorable, ethical individual that I've known for quite a few years. We started this project 5 years ago. He's been investing in Kampot Pepper since 2011. We started BRM in 2016. Ong is a former IFC man, worked for ANZ Royal, Shell Group, and Sokimex, but he had a passion for agriculture. And when I met him, it's one of the key things I think for success in a developing market is identifying the right partner that you can work with. He was doing things on a farm that I hadn't seen before, using Japanese equipment for seeding, and it was just a really interesting project. We use drones, for example, for both insecticide as well as seeding. It's quite an interesting project. Let me go forward. Okay, went the wrong way. The other way. Okay. Oop. Sorry, it's a little delayed. Okay, so our rice mill is about 200 kilometers north of Phnom Penh. Just got it on the map there in Kampong Thom. For those of you who don't know Cambodia, it's about halfway between Phnom Penh and Siem Reap, where we are surrounded by water. We control the water, which is very important, obviously, for any agricultural project. We have a river that is around our land. We have a lake, and we have 7 reservoirs that we built. We're also connected to the new government-sponsored canal. So our plantation, as we said, it's 2,200 hectares. We use Japanese equipment that we buy secondhand from Japan. The Japanese government very kindly supports their agriculture industry every year and gives their farmers almost every year new equipment. So we're very happy to take their secondhand equipment at 20% of the replacement cost. So yeah, currently we're planting out of our 2,200 hectares. We are planting 1,500 hectares presently. We will grow that eventually to 1,800 hectares, and which will produce at least 14,000 tons of jasmine paddy a year. Okay. Now did that. Okay. This is our newly completed rice mill on the bottom left. It's a 20,000 ton per year rice mill. We have a separate facility for both drying as well as for milling. And our plan is to double our capacity through, we hope, a public listing of this project, so to be able to be one of the major players in rice in the kingdom. We currently are selling all of our rice from the last couple of months domestically, but we do hope to be exporting a big amount of it in the future. So just a little bit on rice in general in Cambodia. Cambodia, rice is planted all along the alluvial plain where water is plentiful. Cambodia produces almost 10 million tons of rice a year. And the sad thing about the rice industry in Cambodia is we're only milling our domestic consumption requirement, which is about 2.5 to 2.7 million tons per year. And the rest of it is exported from the country as paddy. So there's a number of reasons why this happens. It's a matter of needing more investment into modern milling equipment, and it's very much linked to a lack of working capital. So we have our neighbors in Thailand and Vietnam get to benefit quite often from commodities where they are able to pick up things in Cambodia, bring them back to Vietnam and Thailand, and do the processing there. And in the meantime, the Cambodian farmers are being paid 20 to 25% less than similar farmers in Vietnam and Thailand. When we came into this project, we saw this as an opportunity to invest and maybe change this this narrative using our fund that we set up for that purpose. Another problem in Cambodia is yields are very, very low, and we were talking, as Jim was saying, it happens in almost everything. Right now, yields are half the yield in Vietnam, for example. That is a number of factors, not enough investment into fertilizer, not investing into the land to be able to control water. Almost all the farmers in the country only plant one crop a year. We're getting 2 crops because we've invested heavily into building up berms and irrigation and pumping equipment. And we think that there needs to be a little bit more investment into the actual part of growing rice. Better seed, irrigation, and finance. Cambodian rice exports. It's something that we read about quite often in the local media, but it's very, very small. Last year, I think we exported 680,000 tons of 680,000 kilos of rice. So it's a very, very small amount. The majority of the rice, as I said, goes out as paddy. It's not being milled. And there is I think, a very low-hanging fruit of being able to change that through an investment in milling equipment and having proper working capital. Let me see, what else do I have there? So again, key issue for rice milling is to develop the yield, as we said, to try to increase knowledge. So what we've done on our farm is a little bit interesting. We initially started with the idea of we're going to come in, we're going to use our modern equipment, and we're going to have a commercial plantation, which frankly did not work. So what we modified, when we hired our Cambodian labor force and they were working for a company, they wanted to work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And we changed that to offering them an opportunity to be their own self-employed masters, and we give them the use of our land, we provide them seed, we buy back the rice from them. They are putting in a lot of effort, they are making more money, and as a result, we make money. So we've kind of converted what we originally had planned, and now we have a model farm of just about 50 hectares that we use as a way of teaching people how the best practices. We control our land in terms of what goes onto the rice field, so we have complete traceability on all of our product. We talked about the food safety aspect, which is very important. So we know exactly what goes into all of the rice that we currently produce and what we mill, and we think there's added value for that. Our plan is to invest further in processing and put some investment into added value product, such as crackers and noodles, and we've recently bought a flour machine to produce high quality rice flour. It's a very interesting situation when you go into a supermarket in Cambodia and you find imported product for things that can grow here, and it's just a matter of investment into processing and packaging. I think that's all I've had. I'll open up for questions later, but nice overview of what we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the last presentation for the day before we get to questions, may I encourage you now to send your questions if you're listening in, so that when Daniel finishes, we have some questions available. Daniel Rothenberg, Baby Burr Farm. If I could say U.S. oil money into Cambodian agriculture.
This is true.
So this is a great example of a U.S. investment into...
Who's that, Monoculture?
Isn't that lovely?
That does not
So,
quite look like Cambodia.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, AmCham. Thank you, everyone. I do not have a background in doing presentations or farming, so this is all very new for me. I'll try to give you the background of how our farm started and what our goals are. It's a little bit circuitous, as you can probably tell from this image that's up on the screen right now. I'm missing the snow. So, I was born in New York. I come from a background in the ski industry, which is obviously seasonal work, and in fine arts. I was a photographer. So what brought me to Cambodia back in 1993 was Angkor Wat and this post-war country and my curiosity. I was working in Nepal during the off-season at the time, and I would come through Bangkok all the time, as many of us who come to Asia do, and I was curious about Angkor Wat. When I came here, I met these amazing people, and these amazing people, if you can see on my ski helmet there, this is back in my ski teaching days, there's a Cambodian flag. So I was living half the year in Cambodia, half the year in the U.S. I started building some schools here to help some of the children who I was taking photos of. And a lot of my, shall we say, wealthy clients in the United States got curious about Cambodia. And so luckily, they got behind me. We built schools. I traveled back and forth. And I started getting older. And one of my great clients said, you need a business in Cambodia. So I was looking at the possibilities. And I thought, well, my photography career is ending. This is a picture of me at my last exhibition in Phnom Penh with some of the kids from some of our education programs. And my investor said, find a business. So we decided Kampot Pepper. Kampot Pepper has geographical indication status, just like Parmigiano or Champagne. It's considered the best tasting black pepper in the world. My investor thought the idea of real estate investment and high-end value agriculture products was a good safety net in a developing investment market. So this is the beginning of our farm. This is in Sept. We started with 9 hectares and we were going to grow Kampot Pepper. As the years went on, I learned more about farming and I decided, well, maybe Kampot Pepper shouldn't be our only product. Maybe we shouldn't have a monoculture. Maybe we need to add more. As you can see, the soil here is not great. Why the pepper there is so good is because of the minerals. The flavor is wonderful, but organic material in the soil in Cambodia is hard to find. Drainage is hard to control. So I learned all this through my wonderful staff and hard work, and my investor wanted to invest more, again with the real estate as the safety net. So we invested more. You can see we're preparing the land now. This is the upper farm above the pepper you were just looking at, and we're going to plant fruit trees here. So what I looked at as a smart investment was, how do we develop the land and make it grow better product? That's our staff housing. That's one of our reservoirs. As Patrick talked about, water is critical. So what I wanted to develop was a multiple crop on the farm, all of it with high value products. So we grow durian, we grow lemons, which are hard to find in Cambodia. We grow products that we can sell at a good value locally and that are good for people and that are also good for keeping the business sustainable so that we can employ all the locals. That's part of our irrigation system. We're doing everything long-term sustainable. So all of our energy is solar. This is the local rice husk we buy that we use as part of our mulching and our making of our own compost. This comes actually from Battambang, and they don't use it, so we buy it, and it's wonderful on our farm. We use cows, but unlike America, we don't eat our cows. We use our cow poop to feed our worms. And then our worm poop we use to feed our products. There you see vermicast. So this is the cow poop being fed to the worms. And the worm poop is one of the best things you can feed to your product. Our goal on the farm is we have less than 1% organic material in our soil. Our goal is within 5 years to have that up to 5%. And luckily I've learned from some wonderful people in the agriculture industry how that's possible. Here's some of my wonderful staff making some of our own fertilizer with a combination of products that we make on the farm. Vermicast, compost. We make the fertilizer and we fertilize. You can see in the background there is one of our pepper plots. We have our own bees. We're selling honey, but primarily the bees are there to increase pollination and again improve the whole ecology around the farm. And we do get lovely honey from our bees. So as Patrick was saying, we're trying to create high value products to sell in the emerging middle class market here and eventually export. We're trying to build a brand through the quality of these products. And Kampot Pepper is our big export for money. And the rest we're trying to sell to the emerging markets in Siem Reap and Phnom Penh. This is our farm manager and my lovely wife. And she is standing in the middle of sun hemp. So in order to improve the soil, we grow ground cover. The sun hemp really improves the soil, and then you mulch it right in place into the soil, and in a couple of years you have a field where you can grow things you couldn't grow before. And this is one of those fields. That's our staff planting some of our lovely fruit trees. This is a citrus tree. And there you go. That's what Kampot Pepper looks after, Kampot Pepper vines look like after about 3 years of us breaking our backs and taking good care of them. And I will say, as Patrick said, we make lots of mistakes and we keep adjusting our company. Here's our staff. Pepper is a high labor product. You have to pick it by hand. So it's really good for the locals because we put a lot of people to work. And I follow the policy of we treat people here the way I would treat them at home. So everybody gets health care, everybody gets a fair salary, everybody gets profit sharing, and that means our workers work really hard and they love their farm. This is sorting the pepper after it's been dried. And that's what you end up with. White, red, and black. The best tasting pepper you've ever had in your life. This is one of the tunnels we've built recently. We're growing exotic chilies from South America, habeneros, and in order to increase our money flow and have enough revenue to cover our costs, value-added food products is where it's at. There's almost no food production in Cambodia. Once the stuff is harvested, as Patrick brought up, usually it goes out of the country, it gets processed into something and then brought back here and sold at a high price. So we're trying to make artisan quality food products that can sell in Phnom Penh to the locals who are getting much more sophisticated at what they'll buy, and the price goes up. So with these chili peppers and the pineapple and fruit we're growing, we'll make fermented sauces, and the audience in Cambodia is getting smarter and have more money all the time. Aloe, we're growing aloe. And I think that's probably it. There we go. Oh, no, sorry. Lemons. So this is really funny. We were told you can't grow yellow lemons in Cambodia by many people. Brazilian agriculturists, Israeli agriculturists, the locals. I like lemons, so we tried it. Now we're growing Meyer lemons.
That's fantastic.
And as I said, drainage is an issue. Learning from the environment is an issue. But when you have wonderful staff, you go out, you solve the problem, and after this photo was taken, we immediately rented an excavator and put in a few more canals, and now the farm doesn't get floods anymore. You can see in the background there off to the right, there's a little screened house. That's a screen house we built for all our nursery, for all of our little baby seedlings, and it's built with local bamboo. And as I said, we plant ground cover, we plant flowers and legumes and oats and grasses everywhere to increase the quality of the soil. So the goal is every year to create really high quality food products, to pay the staff well and teach them well, and to improve the quality of the farm itself. And, oh, let's go back to that. And when you work hard, that's what you end up with.
Fantastic.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And thank you for letting me present this. And I know our farm is smaller, but I think that all three of us would say that the value here is to help the country of Cambodia develop and evolve and improve everything so that it's good for here and it's good for everybody who invests in here.
Absolutely.
And my investor feels the same way. So we keep getting more money to develop the farm because of the safety net from the real estate and the product that we're growing.
Daniel, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Very encouraging to see the diversity of crops that you bring to the Kingdom of Cambodia.
Thank you.
I will be getting questions through Telegram, so I'm not checking my messages for personal use here. This is for those that will be sending us questions as a result of the webinar. But I'll start off with a question for Ben, if I can. So recently, the Prime Minister of Cambodia had a speech, and he said, hunt for trade. We talked about the size of the bilateral trade of agriculture between Cambodia and the United States. The United States, as I understand, is the largest importer of bananas and the second largest importer of mangoes, which is a topic of discussion with the free trade agreement with China, which was, there was some encouragement to actually send bananas and mangoes to China. But yet we're a big consumer of those products. What is the obstacle between, besides distance, I imagine being one, between the U.S. and Cambodia for more agricultural imports to the United States?
Well, it's not an obstacle, but more of a requirement. Sorry. So for any new products, say, that is not yet being exported to the United States, they have to go through a regulatory process that's approved by the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service that I referred to in my presentation. So, and essentially this is just to ensure that no pests or diseases are coming in on products into the United States that could threaten American agriculture. So what generally happens is that a country that's interested in applying to the United States a new product, say a fruit or vegetable, would reach out to the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, generally contact our offices in Phnom Penh, say, hey, we have an interest, and the government would say, we have our farm have an interest in exporting this. What's the process? And then we would put our APHIS in touch with the regulatory office of Cambodia. Both sides would do a discussion. APHIS would look at how the pest control elements are already working in Cambodia for their exports. So if they meet up with USDA standards and APHIS standards, then that country can get approved to export a new product to the United States. I mean, it is rigorous, but you know, APHIS has, with the new APHIS office here in the region, they opened it in 2018. It does give them a lot more ability to meet with government officials and regulatory officials in Cambodia to discuss opportunities for their Cambodian farmers.
Just a follow-up question. Are the tariffs any different than it would be for, let's say, the Chinese market?
I'm not sure what the tariff rates are. There may be tariff rates between Cambodia and the United States, but I think it's more, I mean, I have a feeling, you know, obviously there may be more tariffs, say, with China and the United States. I think that's the determination of, you know, what products are coming in. I would also note that, you know, often it's what products does the United States may have an issue. You know, is there any sort of duplication there? And I think with mangoes, for instance, and bananas, in the United States, probably not much. So that's another thing where I would have to look at the product and produce in the United States. You know, pepper is a very good example. We looked at that great pepper farm. Well, the United States really doesn't produce much pepper, at understanding. So probably pepper could go in at a low tariff rate. It just, again, depends on the product.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Jim, there's a question from the audience for you. Is the Commercial Aquaculture Manual a public document?
It will be. It will be. It's currently being reviewed by fisheries. We're seeking their endorsement. But before long, it'll be open source, and we would love people to get their hands on it.
Patrick, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So Cambodia rates as one of the top 10 exporters of rice, paddy rice being, as you mentioned, not milled rice. Your presentation really hit the button on that we're not having a milling capacity here, that the investment's not here. It seems like there's profits to be made in milling.
Well, there's a lot of mills here.
What's
but
happened?
There
Why isn't
are
that
many
investment?
mills that are not to the modern standard that are required for exports. The ones that are there generally suffer a working capital issue. There's not the working capital lines of credit that you would find in other markets like in Vietnam or in Thailand. So that is a real major challenge. Now, we've basically been, you know, using equity finance to provide that, which is very expensive, and it's not something that, you know, we have a fund that has backed that. It's not something that most farmers can come up with, and it'd be great if we can help, you know, if the government can help to develop that. I know the Rural Development Bank is actively working, and they're addressing it, but it's something that is definitely needed.
We see a lot of investment in real estate and other parts of the economy. What's holding back investment into agriculture?
I would say agriculture is very difficult.
Are the profits there?
I mean, it's a very difficult field. It's why there's not a lot of people in it. There are profits to be made. I mean, if we hit our targets, you know, in 3 years, we will have an EBITDA of $5 million a year. You know, I think there's a very good opportunity here. There's a lot of challenges in order to go about it. We've been, and it's also a long scale project. You know, as Daniel said, you know, we started 5 years ago. This is not for the faint of heart. You know, we're looking at a 10-year project. So it is that kind of scale minimum that people need to look at. So I think more investment is required, and particularly in processing and added value. There's a statistic that I love to quote: 60% of the fruits and vegetables in the kingdom today are imported in a country that grows everything. It makes no sense to me. So I'm really happy to hear what you're growing, Daniel. I've tasted your chilies, by the way, and they were amazing. I had a habanero chili sauce at a barbecue last night. It was fantastic.
Daniel, going to your point about real estate, again, we said this is Texas oil money coming into Cambodia, with sustainable farming. Part of the investment, though, is the appreciation of real estate at some point.
Absolutely.
So can you go into that a little bit of, because you chose a very good part of Cambodia.
Well, yeah, I mean, so as I said, my investor is an old ski client. He has lots of money. He invests in many things. But the fact that we have a personal relationship meant that some of the issues that Patrick and I have both talked about with, investors want their money out in 4 years or 7 years. And if it's high risk, they want higher, possibilities. So what we looked at were a bunch of different industries, but what made sense is Cambodia was on this, like what happened in California 30 years ago. Real estate was doubling in value in certain areas year on year. And so if you could say to your investor, look, we're going to try to run an agriculture business. We're going to try to make a farm that's successful. We know the margins are small. We know the time is long. But the safety net is the land we're buying in order to have this farm is going to double in value every year for the next 5-10 years. So even if the business doesn't make a profit, we've got the land. So my investor's money was protected. But again, it was also the personal relationship. So I think that if you wanted to put money into Cambodia right now, any industry where real estate is a cohort, whether it's hotels or agriculture, the land in Cambodia is going to keep going up in value. Land in Asia in general is just going up in value. There's a lot of people here, and a lot of people want the land. And the Chinese money that's coming in lately, because of the relationship with Hun Sen and the Chinese government, is helping drive that even faster. So if you're looking to start a business, being able to protect your investor with the real estate is a really good thing.
If I could echo on that, I mean, we also did the same thing. I mean, our investment was pretty much underwritten by the value of the land. We started off at buying land at $1,500 to $2,000 per hectare, and now we're getting offers from Chinese investors of $8,000 to $10,000. So the kind of scale that you can enjoy for a little bit longer term plan, I think is interesting. And there's a number of areas in the country where I think it's still very good value.
It's quite amazing how land appreciates here in the right places.
Yeah, wonderful.
It just exponentially increases over a 2-year period.
I have a question for Jim. And he knows on our farm, aside from rice, we've planted 10,000 cashews, we've planted 1,000 orange trees, 1,000 mango, 1,000 fragrant coconut, and then we've tried to use our aquifers for fish production, but it was done without any real understanding of the requirements. So in a case like what we're doing, would your group be able to help us, or is there, I mean, I'm sure there's a number of companies like ours that we don't really know what we're doing on that, but it'd be great to have the added value of producing some aquaculture in the scale.
Well, and the first positive point is you're in Kampot Pepper. That's one of our 6 provinces where we're working. We can't work outside of our 6 provinces. That's part of the proposal requirements of the contract. Second is you understand commerce, and based on what you've said, you have a good number of square meters of water with decent depth that could probably sustain an aquacultural production.
Excellent.
So then the question is, our technicians come in, look at that, say in principle, it would work. This is what you need to understand. And you're going to need a farm manager. And again, that's in particular a challenge with Cambodian aquaculture, with traditional farmers who they know how to raise fish. They even have some idea of what they're spending and what they're making. But at the level of investment and management that's required to really get the profits, you need to keep records. You know, you need to watch your costs. You need to be able to calculate your profit margins. And that's part of what we're teaching too. So if you have somebody on your farm, you know, that you could second to that, or you want to bring somebody in, because we are helping train technicians that are understanding how to do this, let's talk.
Excellent.
Yeah, we have another question from the audience. I'll just put it to the panel. I probably don't understand it that well, but is the kingdom better suited to non-perishable foodstuffs, such as chili and pepper, as opposed to freight and veg, which has a high spoilage?
As I said, 60% of the fruit and vegetables sold in the country are imported. So I think that's a very, that's something that I think should be addressed. There's no reason that we're importing as much as we're importing to Cambodia. And I think it's investment into hydroponics, into more covered greenhouses, things like that would help to address this.
Okay, I have a question for Jim. You've now had a few years' experience under your belt here, going out to the field and seeing the landscape of how the fishery industry works here. What are you sort of finding as the difficulties in achieving your mission, let's say, in that, is it a fragmented, very fragmented, rather than a scale operation here? And that meaning that you have to, the numbers game here, you have to meet a lot of people and you have to gather a lot of, to actually achieve your goal. It's not that it's a large scale up. The U.S. has really become a manufactured food production. So what are you finding here as, how will that evolve what you're trying to achieve, and from where Cambodia is today to where you want to see it after you finish?
You know, I think one of the key things that we're determining with a number of studies, including the recent EMC report that came out, and I again would encourage people to go to our CAST website, because it's a report that's focused on potential investors. You know, we're not talking to agriculturalists, we're talking to people that want to invest in agriculture, aquaculture. And it's the linkages. It's the linkages between the market, the people that are buying and selling the product, and the people that are producing. And just as you were saying, Patrick, you know, with the vegetables, part of the challenge there is such a well-developed supply chain of people going to Vietnam, products coming from Vietnam. It's just easier. It's harder to find your suppliers in Cambodia. It's harder to link them up. It's harder just to make the trade work. But it takes effort and time and connectivity. We think the association is going to help with that. If we get members of the association coming to meetings and understanding, if we can get some of the collectors that are, or the wholesalers that are buying Vietnamese fish to understand that there's a market for Cambodian raised fish. Somebody mentioned, I think it was you, Daniel, that the market, or Patrick, maybe it was both of you. Some people are ready to pay a little more for a safer product, for a better product, for something that means something. And that's one of our strategies as well, in the association in particular, and the Fisheries Administration, trying to create that image of Cambodian raised fish. So get a little higher price. Once you can do that, maybe it makes the competition a little less attractive. So those are some of the challenges. Market connectivity is a big one.
I'd like to make a quick announcement as well today, and then a last question for Ben, if I can. I know we're going over time a little bit. ABA Bank has a special fee discount for any of the agricultural companies that are exporting goods. They will waive the incoming funds, the payment, obviously, for the exports, which is now 0.1%. Or 1,000 for each million. So they would waive that fee. If anyone is interested in that, that's exporting to outside the country and is getting incoming payments for those goods, for that special offer, you can contact our AmCham office for that. And finally, that's something you'll be interested in soon.
Absolutely, we hope.
When your crops mature.
Exporting is a good thing.
Ben, final question. You do a lot of analysis and study work in the markets. What does Cambodia have to do to raise besides all the good work that we're seeing here done today, to really raise the standard in its agricultural industry and become a big, not only domestic producer, but an exporter of agricultural goods, and so it's a much bigger part of the economy than it is today? That was a goal of the government here for a long time.
Yeah, I would say a big one is becoming familiar with world standards, regulatory standards, because I think a big part of what, if they're exporting to a country, ideally, what are the rules they have to get past to get a product, for instance, fruit and our APHIS regulatory aspects of things. But, familiarizing themselves with the WTO on the sanitary, phytosanitary elements of that. And that's one thing actually USDA trainings was, when Cambodia has a new regulation that comes into effect, announcing it on the WTO to the WTO. This is our new thing we're putting in place. And then becoming more familiar, and through that way they become more familiar themselves with how regulatory aspects work. So, they'll understand if they want to export to country X or Y or Z, how do they get across those barriers? Because they do phytosanitary and technical barriers to trade being an issue for any exporting country. And so becoming familiar with that, becoming familiar with which countries a strong regulatory framework would be a good aspect for that. I also feel with that ability, it promotes the idea that, hey, if these products are coming in and they're meeting these standards, they must be safe, they must be high quality. U.S. agriculture, that's something we try to promote through our products is, these are well regulated, they're safe, they're high quality in the United States, and those products are going over everywhere else around the world. And I think that type of looking at that same aspect in what Cambodia is producing not only helps it to Cambodian consumers, makes it easier for other countries to accept those products overseas.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for joining us. I would like to also mention a very big thanks to Mango Tango, who provided the recording of this today and the live stream. This will be a video that will be available on our Facebook page and our other media platforms. Great job again by Mango Tango. Jim, thank you again for your great work here.
Thank you.
And appreciate you coming today. Patrick as well. Daniel, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Ben, thanks for joining us in Ho Chi Minh. We really appreciate it. For everybody, thank you for joining our webinar, and stay safe. Thank you.